We only have a small amount of kale left from the garden that we planted last fall, and we need to utilize it and get rid of it because we'll be wanting to plant in this place some of those wonderful spring vegetables. So I'm going to harvest some kale here, and me and Matt are going to have it. I'm going to make a soup for supper, which I will show you. Very simple, hearty, tasty, healthy soup. And since I'm only making it for me and him, we're the only ones that will be here tonight for supper. Katie's out gallivanting, as we would say. I don't need very much. And if we ever did have to pull it up before, you know, like if we were ready to plant today and it was still here, what I would do with it, I could definitely, there's some big weeds in it, I could definitely pull it up and freeze it. But what I would likely do with it is pull it up and feed it to our chickens. So it would kind of be feeding us that way, even though it was, you know, helping them prepare eggs for us. So the kale soup that I'm going to make is very simple, but it's very versatile. You can, as you watch me make it, be thinking of how you would like to make it. Maybe you want to add peppers where I don't add any peppers. Maybe you want to add some ground sausage or some ground meat of some kind. So how I like to make it is I'm going to start with sauteing my onions and my garlic, and then I'm going to add some potatoes and some chicken stock and kind of cook those, then add my kale, add some seasonings along the way, and then I'm going to actually poach 2 eggs in it. That's going to be my last step that I do. So I'm going to show you how I make it, but just be thinking of how you would like to make it. So I've got some olive oil just in the bottom of the pan, and I'm going to add some onions and some garlic. And I'm just going to let that cook, 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, it's been cooking about 2 minutes. I'm going to add, I've got some potatoes cubed up. And I've got some chicken stock. So I'm just making a very small amount of soup, but of course you could use more potatoes, more onions, all that if you were making soup for, you know, a large crowd. It's just me and Matt tonight, so it's not going to take much to feed us. And the amount of broth is kind of up to you too. Do you like it real brothy? Do you want it kind of less broth? So I'm going to put the lid on this and I'm going to let it cook for a few minutes. Actually, I'm going to bring it up to a boil and then kind of bring it back down to a simmer and let it cook while I chop up my kale. Now that I've got it come up to a boil, got the potatoes and the onions boiling, I'm going to turn it back down, the eye down, so that it'll just kind of be at a low simmer. And I'm going to add about a teaspoon of salt and some pepper. You could add to taste any other kind of spices that you'd like. And then I'm going to cover it back and let it cook while I chop up the kale. Cornbread goes really well with this soup, so I'm going to put some cornbread in the oven. Let's make an easy, quick supper. So if you have really tough pieces of kale, mine are all pretty fairly small, you can break off the stem, and if you just chop it up very finely, and we can throw it back in, it'll cook up, and then I save the leaves to actually, I kind of break the stems and lay the leaves together. And do a rough chop on all of them before I put them back in. But even those stems, if you chop them up really finely, they'll kind of just become part of the soup and be tender enough to eat. So I'm going to go ahead and throw those stems, because they're tougher, in and let them cook for about 2 or 3 minutes. And while they're cooking, I'll go ahead and start just kind of rough chopping my kale. Of course, this is personal preference. If you want really big pieces or really small, tiny pieces, I kind of just give it a rough chop. Now I'm going to add the rest of my kale. And let it continue to cook for about 8 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes, something like that. So once the potatoes are done, and they are, it's pretty much finished. So now I'm going to add just a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. Stir that in good. Now at this point, if you wanted to add a little bit more broth, you could. If you think that's not enough broth, you could add more water, more chicken stock, vegetable stock, whatever you're using. And then I'm just going to kind of gently put my eggs in there. And get a little bit of that juice and put over top of them. Give them a little bit more pepper and salt. Then I'm going to cover them and let them cook for about 4 minutes. Okay, now I'm ready to serve it. I'm just going to make Matt's bowl for him. Cut us a nice piece of cornbread, put in the bowl, and get some of that. Get the egg, but make sure you get some of that wonderful juice and those wonderful potatoes and kale. Looks like a feast. Okay, Matt, yours is ready. I'm gonna do the same for me. I forgot to put some on Matt's, but I'll go back and put it. But what's especially good on top of it is some Parmesan cheese, so we'll put that on top, and I'll get him some to put on his. Looks good?
Looks excellent. hungry.
You ready to eat?
Ready.
Hard day?
Yep, very hard.
So I hope you enjoyed seeing how to make this very simple soup. I will leave the recipe in the description below, but it's so versatile. As you saw, you could switch it up to meet your needs, your family's needs, what they preferred, whether you want to use chicken stock or water or vegetable stock. A stock, vegetable, or chicken or something like that would make it more flavorful, but again, that's totally up to you. I probably have been making it, I probably found this recipe, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, maybe longer than that. Time goes by so fast. But when I first started making kale, or started growing kale, didn't make it, I grew it, I needed to find recipes because I did not grow up eating kale. Granny and Pap never grew kale in their garden. They never ate it that I remember. But Matt's mother, Miss Cindy, introduced me to kale, and I really loved it. And then once I realized I could grow it, well, ever since then I've been growing it. I typically grow it some in the spring, but mostly my big crop of kale I like to do in the fall because where I live, normally, just like this winter, the kale will overwinter. So all winter long I've got a little bit of fresh greens out in the garden if I need them, or if I get a hankering, a taste for that fresh greens, I can go out and get some. So this kale that we're eating tonight, as I told you earlier, I actually planted it last fall. So that's how long it's been growing. So I hope you enjoyed seeing how to make one of my simple suppers. Thanks for watching the video. As always, I hope you'll keep watching and keep helping me celebrate Appalachia. Is it good, Dad?